Okay, so this is our landing of Space Shuttle Atlantis, one of the last landings in the shuttle program. And I've heard a lot about change. I've only been here for a little bit of time. I arrived yesterday, but speaking to people and hearing some of the talks earlier, change is everywhere, right? No one can hide from it. And certainly that was the case at NASA. And the theme here is bold moves. I think it really was a bold move for NASA, what they did at the end of the shuttle program. They had wanted, with the shuttle program, at the beginning, for it to be a commercial vehicle eventually. They were actually rewriting some of the manuals so that airline pilots could one day fly this thing. But what happened was they had that first accident, Challenger, back in 1986, and NASA realized they're not ready for that yet. But when the shuttle was going away, they tried to take advantage of that to inspire commercial enterprise and new technology to come into the program. And they set up what we call the Commercial Crew Program with companies like SpaceX. SpaceX was in charge of a lot. I mean, NASA was helping, but they were in charge of a lot. They were going to build a vehicle, they were going to test it, and they were going to operate it as well. So this was like, are you kidding me? Why are we doing this? This is all new to us. And the amount of technology that was coming in there, the artificial intelligence, the automation. If you've seen some of the things they've been able to do, like land a stage of the rocket out on a platform in the ocean, it's just at night. We were hearing these plans like there's no way this is going to happen. But they started slowly and started building up, and we got more and more confidence in what they were doing. The automation was really hard for us to accept because the space shuttle was a very manually flown vehicle. And now just about everything was going to be done by computer. But they showed us that in many of the cases, most of the cases where a person could intervene, you were actually safer with the computer intervening. The automation was safer than the person. We're like, okay, that's good. We want to stay alive. So it became an automated vehicle that allowed less training so more people could fly. You could concentrate on other aspects of your flight. The reusability of it has driven the price down, so we see more and more people going to space now. And so what we have through that change was the old system was the shuttle, my launch, and now we're into this new era with all these changes. And they were hard to accept. A lot of us didn't want to accept them, and you had to, or you had to get out of the way. And those who have accepted that, the automation, the changes, the way the program is now as compared to the way it was 20 years ago when I had my first flight, is much different. And we're starting to see some of the benefits, even to think of all the people that have gotten a chance to go into space and the success that NASA's had with its missions as well. So that change was really difficult to accept, but we're seeing the benefits of it now.
It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my path to becoming an astronaut, which is a lot about perseverance and persistence, which is valuable not only when you're trying to reach a goal, but after you've gotten there to continue to try to be successful. So I'll talk about that. I'll talk about some problems we ran into, some problems we ran into in our flights and how we handled those by working together. Talk about the big picture, keeping the big picture and the passion in mind. And through all that, I want to tell you how cool it is to fly in space. It really was an extraordinary opportunity for me, and I want to share some of that, those happy memories and some of those stories with you as well. Okay, so we're going to start off with a slide here, which is not me, okay? This is not me. This is taken from the first moon landing, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, and I'm old enough to remember this. I was 6 years old when this took place, and I watched this on the black and white TV screen that we had in my home just outside of New York City in Long Island, my family home. And I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to grow up to be like Neil Armstrong. And here's my proof of that. This is me probably 2 days after the moon landing, dressed up like Neil Armstrong in the backyard. The reason that flight suit I have is gray is because it's a converted elephant costume from the first grade play. And I'm holding my astronaut Snoopy toy, so he was like Buzz Aldrin, Snoopy was, and here I am pretending to be Neil Armstrong. So that's what I wanted to be when I was a little boy. I loved the space program, learned as much as I could about it. But by the time I was about 8 or 9 years old, I realized I was never going to grow up to be Neil Armstrong. Around that time, I found out that I was afraid of heights, and I still don't like heights. And yes, it is problematic for an astronaut to be afraid of heights, but you have to work over these challenges. But I just didn't see myself growing up to be this superhero test pilot like Neil Armstrong. So I kind of crossed that off the list of possibilities in life. But when I was in college, my senior year, studying engineering, I went to the movies and I saw this movie called The Right Stuff. Maybe some of you have seen it. It's based on a book by Tom Wolfe, and I saw this movie and I read the book, and I realized that my passion, my interest in the space program never really went away. I just didn't know that I could ever be a part of it. I worked for IBM for a couple years, which was a great job, but it really wasn't what I wanted to do. And I thought about it long and hard, and I think maybe many of you as well, being in an industry where people think of fishing as something they do to enjoy themselves, right? It's a fun, I think that probably the majority of you really love fishing, and you figured out a way to make a living at it, which is pretty cool. And I was like, I really love the space program. I got to be a part of it. I got to figure out a way I can make this be a big part of my life. So I left my job after working 2 years after college to go to grad school to try to be a part of the space program. Once I'd got my master's degree, I was still in school trying to get more education, but I was able to apply to the astronaut program. And NASA makes announcements every few years that they're looking for astronauts, and you send in your application and see what happens. So that's what I did when they made that announcement. I sent in my application. I waited for about 6 months or so to get a response, and I got a very official letter from NASA. I was very excited, NASA letterhead. I opened this thing up and read the letter, and it said no. There are other words on the page, I'm sure, but the thing that resonated was no. We could have saved the taxpayer a lot of money on ink by just 2 letters. Anyway, so I didn't want to give up. I was almost done with my grad school education, and NASA said they're looking for astronauts again. So I sent in another application. 6 months later, got back another letter. This one was different. They changed the date at the top. Other than that, it was the same letter I had gotten a couple years earlier, so I was rejected a second time. Took a job down in Houston at the Johnson Space Center. I was lucky enough to get a job down there working as a research engineer. I was doing that for a while, and NASA said they're looking for astronauts again, so I sent in my third application. This time I didn't get a letter in the mail. I got a phone call. They wanted me to come in for an interview, which meant I was a finalist. I'm getting close now. And the interview is actually not just an interview. It is a selection board interview. You're interviewed by a group of people who ask you questions and stuff, but it's also like an experience for a whole week down there. There's written exams. There's lots of medical exams. They check you out from head to toe. There's social events. You get to meet lots of people. They want to get to know everybody really well. And they got to know me really well. And then they rejected me. So I was 0 for 3. And not only that, I was medically disqualified on top of it because I failed the eye exam. Now, all this has changed now. This was over 25 years ago, so the rules have changed. But back then, you had to see pretty well without glasses, and I couldn't do that well enough to their standards. And they also didn't accept LASIK. Now they do. It's different now. But back then, this is 25 years ago. I don't even know if LASIK existed. They didn't accept any of that stuff. So I was kind of out of luck. And once you're disqualified, they're not even going to read your application again, is what I was told. And I was like, I can't even try again, which was pretty disheartening. But I thought about it, spoke to people, and I found out about something called vision training. So I was kind of desperate. It was methods you mainly used with kids, but I told the doctor I could be really immature, please help me. And it was like using different exercises to strengthen your eye muscles and to train your brain to focus beyond what it's looking at. It didn't seem like it was going to be effective necessarily, but I was desperate. That's the only thing I could find that might give me a chance. And so I went through this training and worked hard at it, and I was able to pick up a couple lines on the eye chart so I could at least submit an application again. And I was able to submit a fourth application. Got another interview, passed the eye exam this time, and this time I got selected on the fourth try. This is, if we can go back to the slides here. There we go. So I am, if you're looking for me in this thing, second row from the top, third guy from the left, that's me. We were a very international group. We had mainly Americans, but we also had 8 countries represented in our astronaut class. So all of us had a different path to get there, but the one thing in common to get this job, no matter where you were from around the world, was perseverance. Very rarely are you selected on the first try. It usually takes a couple tries. It took me 4. But I think that that's important to remember because all of you are in this room are successful with your businesses, and it wasn't easy to get to where you are. And when we showed up and we took this picture together, I realized all of us had this path to get there that required a lot of hard work and perseverance, but we hadn't done anything yet. But what was important was that same perseverance is needed to be successful once you get that opportunity, right? Whatever got you to that goal that you have, you need to continue to do that in order to be successful once you're given the opportunity. And we were all given a great opportunity and wanted to make the most of it. This is my first launch into space. That's our launch for not too far from here, right? Maybe some of you get a chance to visit the Kennedy Space Center while you're in town or in the area here. That's where we took off from. That's where all the shuttles launch from. We're still launching people to space. That's where we launch them from the Kennedy Space Center. There was a cloud deck at about 10,000 feet. It was a very early morning flight. The sun was just coming up, and that's our launch photo. Space Shuttle Columbia was the spaceship that I was on that day. And it was 6 years of training. I was selected in '96. It took 6 years of training for me to get onto a spaceship in 2002. This is the Hubble Space Telescope, which is where our destination was. The Hubble is a very successful, arguably the greatest scientific instrument ever built. We have other telescopes as well now. The James Webb Telescope's an excellent facility as well up in space. But Hubble is a great telescope, still working, and it was designed to be serviced by astronauts. So there were 5 missions to go up there and improve the telescope. I was on the final 2 of those, final 2 missions to do that. This is me on my very first spacewalk, right? There I am out there. And the first thing you do on your spacewalk is you get your picture taken. We don't take any chances. You get right up there. You move around a little bit, get ready to go. You know how many pictures there are of Neil Armstrong on the moon? You know that picture I showed you? That's not Neil Armstrong. He took that picture of Buzz Aldrin. There are 0 pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon. He had the camera and took pictures of Buzz. So that was Neil Armstrong, though. You know, focus on the job. Oh, you only got 1 camera? I'll take pictures of you, right? No picture. Can you imagine going to the moon and not getting a picture of yourself? Can you imagine, how many selfies have you taken already today with your friends, right? Can you imagine on the way back from the moon, Houston, we have a problem. I got to get a photo. Can we turn around? You know, but we don't take that chance anymore. We learned our lesson. First thing you do on your spacewalk, you get your photo taken, and you can see the Earth reflected in my visor. It was just glorious. It was beautiful looking at our planet through the windows of the spacecraft. But getting outside, we were at a high altitude. We're 100 miles higher than where the space station is, so we could see the curve of our planet. And just magnificent. I'm going to show you a shot of the Earth here. This happens to be the Middle East, but just a beautiful, beautiful planet that we live on. When I really had a time to look at it it was during my second spacewalk. My first spacewalk, I was kind of sticking to business mainly. Didn't look around very much, believe it or not. But my second spacewalk, I felt a lot more comfortable and started to take time to look at our planet and how beautiful it was. And the thought that went through my mind during this spacewalk opportunity I had to look was that this is a heavenly view. If you could be up in heaven looking down, that's what I felt like. I'm looking down on our planet. You know, this is just a great view. And then I thought, nah, that's not right. It's more beautiful than that. This is what heaven must look like. I felt like our planet, when I was looking at it, to me, was an absolute paradise. Just so beautiful. And I looked to the other direction, and there's a darkness out there. And, you know, we've checked out the neighborhood. We got nowhere to go. We've got to make this planet work. So I'm happy to hear, you know, I know we all want to enjoy this planet, especially people who are out there on the waters, the oceans, the lakes, and so on, fishing. And so I know that conservation and keeping our planet healthy is so important to all of you. And it really is important. We're just very lucky to be here. The other thing I want to tell you is that there's a lot of water on our planet. With a lot of fish in that water, right? So we learn intellectually when we're in school that the Earth is like 2/3 water, something like that. It was like that. But when you see it from space, there's a lot of water. You know, my first couple of passes looking out the window, like trying to see we're over the ocean. We hit Africa, big giant continent, right? It's gone in a blink and you're over water again. There's just water everywhere. If you're in space and someone asks you where you are and you can't get to the window or the computer to check, the best answer is the Pacific Ocean. That's where because that's probably where you're over. There is a lot of water for people to enjoy and go out and fish. So, but that's something that struck me about our planet. Lots of water. Okay. My second flight into space, this was taken right before our launch, well, on Space Shuttle Atlantis. Now, what had happened in the time between my first and second space flight, a year after I mentioned my first space flight was on Space Shuttle Columbia. The next mission for Space Shuttle Columbia didn't come back, and the crew did not come back from that mission. Many of you might remember that. This was it was February 1st of 2003. We had the accident. So they had launched on January 17th. When they launched, they took some debris. They took a debris hit, foam came off the external tank, and hit the wing, the leading edge wing of the space shuttle, put a hole in it. Now the crew didn't know this, we didn't. This is what we found out months later in the investigation. So they were orbiting around the planet with a hole in the wing, and when you slow down, then the atmosphere creates a lot of friction in order to land, to slow down to land at the Kennedy Space Center as well, typically. Builds up a lot of heat, like thousands of degrees of heat. And because they had a hole in the wing, that heat entered the wing and took the wing off, and we lost the spaceship and the crew. It was devastating. It was the worst day of my life. It was a Saturday morning that this happened. Again, probably many of you remember it. Just a terrible day. And of course, we had to memorialize our friends and try to help their families. But after about a week or so, we started thinking, too, about what about the space program? Because we had just lost a vehicle for the second time. Before I was an astronaut, they lost Space Shuttle Challenger on ascent. And now, all these years later, we've lost another spaceship. And it became pretty clear that things needed to change, or something needed to be done, or we didn't know if we were going to fly again, or what was going to happen with the space shuttle. They stopped all flights. They said, we're not going anywhere until we figure this out. But we didn't want that accident to take more than it already had taken. So we got to work, and we figured out ways. I tried to help as much as I could, especially in some of the spacewalking repairs that we could do on the space shuttle. But we had our big team at NASA focused on making sure that debris would not fly off of the tank like it did, being able to inspect the vehicle, being able to repair the vehicle. If you're in space and you find out that you have a hole, go out there and fix it. And if you can't come back because you have a bad spaceship, like my friends on STS-107 on the previous Columbia flight, you could stay in orbit on the space station. Now that would work for the space station, but not for Hubble, because Hubble doesn't have life support. So they actually canceled the final mission to Hubble, and we understood why, because it was too dangerous. You couldn't risk sending people up there without giving them a way to get back. But after about a year and a half of looking at possibilities, and a new administrator came in, he gave us the task of trying to figure out how to get back to Hubble. And I was part of this group that he put together because I had some experience with the telescope, and he told us that we could tell him all day why we can't go to Hubble, figure out a way that we can go. And so what we did is we came up with a scheme of a rescue flight. So if you go to the telescope and you're stuck there and you can't get home, a rescue crew would come get you. And that's what you see on the launch pad here. If we go back to that picture, thank you. In the foreground is Space Shuttle Atlantis. That's going to be our spaceship going to Hubble. In the background is Space Shuttle Endeavour, ready to go on the same launch day just in case. So if we took some damage and we couldn't fix it, we had a rescue crew, and we planned this out, that they would come get us. We would transfer through a series of spacewalks. They trained with us. They were in quarantine with us, ready to go. We were very nice to them, by the way. We wanted to make sure they'd come get us if needed. But that's how we came back. That's how we were able to get the mission back on the books and recover from the accident. And I bring this up because not everything is peachy. Not everything goes well like the way you would like it to go. And we had a lot of highs in the space program, but we also had a lot of lows. And I look back now on my career as an astronaut. I was there at NASA for 18 years as an astronaut. And of course, my highlights is what I'm telling you about the great things about flying in space. But when I really look back at it, I think one of my highlights, too, is how we recovered from that tragedy. Because we really came together as a team to come back from that devastation that we had. There's such a big disappointment and loss of life, and our program had to change. Everything was terrible, but we stuck together, and we were able to come back as a team to fly again and be successful. And I look back at that, I'm really proud of the way we recovered from that bad time. And I think that we learn about who we are and what our teams are made of, not in the good times. And when you're winning and things are going great, you high five, everyone's doing great, everyone's happy. But what happens when something goes in the other direction? Usually for reasons beyond your control. Something happens and all of a sudden it's not as good as it was a year ago or 2 years ago. All of a sudden something's gone bad. What do? Do we stick with it? Do we come together as a team? Do we point fingers? Not a good idea. Or do we try to fix the problem together? And I think we find out who we are and how good our teams are, not in the good times, but in the difficult times. And that was certainly the case for us at NASA. This is my crew, about ready to get into the Astro van and right out to the launch pad. That's me on the far left. On my second flight, I'm going to show you some video now of my second flight into space back in May of 2009 on Space Shuttle Atlantis.
For launch, GC. Go. Payloads. Go. Guidance. Go. Fido. Go. Prop. Go. GNC. Go. Max. Go. Eagle. Go. Ecom. Go.
7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 1, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis. Final visit against the vision of Hubble into the deepest grandeur of our universe.
Houston, Atlanta, small program with the FCS channel.
5 passed across the board, Scooter, no action.
Okay, got LBO rates right, Jake? I do. All right, I see him in the bucket. Bid 71.
Atlantis on its way, all 3 engines now throttling down as the vehicle passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure.
Atlantis, Houston, no action on the MPF H2 out T.
Houston, we copy, no action. Back at 104, Scooter.
Three, 103.
Auto. Okay, that all looks good.
Okay. All right. So this is a photo of the beginning of what you just saw in the video. And right here in this photo, we haven't yet cleared the tower, right? Spaceship is just a split second, is just lifted off. And we're already going 100 miles an hour. We accelerate from 0 to 17,500 miles an hour in just 8.5 minutes. So what you saw in the video was the main engine start up first. There are 3 engine bells at the bottom of the space shuttle, fueled with the external tank fuel, liquid hydrogen and oxygen. The tank is that big orange tank there that you see that the shuttle's attached to. So those engines start up and they run for 6 seconds. And so that gives you 6 seconds to make up your mind if you want to go anywhere. Right, you can they actually did that on 2 occasions. They shut down they have liquid engines, just like a lawnmower or a motorboat engine or a car engine. Kill the fuel flow, you're going to shut the engine down. But you have 6 seconds to make up your mind. Because after that, the solid rocket boosters, like those big white rockets on either side of the spaceship, those are like giant sticks of dynamite. So once you light those things, you can't turn them off, and you are going somewhere. It may not be where you want to go, but you're on your way for 2.5 minutes, and they run really rough, so it just shakes you up really a lot of violence, a lot of activity there. What you saw at the end of the video is those solid rocket boosters left the vehicle and returned back to Earth. They picked them up in a boat offshore and brought them back to be repacked and used again. And then once those things leave, after that 2.5 minute mark, it becomes much smoother. Your G-forces build up. You get a maximum of 3 Gs for the last 2.5 minutes. So 3 Gs means 3 times your body weight is hitting you right in the chest because you're on your back. So I felt like there were 3 big dudes sitting on me. That's what it felt like. And then at the end of 8.5 minutes, the main engine's cut, and it gets really quiet and peaceful. I had a pen on the end of a lanyard that kind of just floated up next to me like this. My arms just raised up like this. So our arms stay down like this because we're on Earth in gravity, right? But if you're in 0 gravity, it'll just float up like this. So that happened, and it was still strapped in, but the first thing we do is take our helmet off. So I took my helmet off. I saw Tom Hanks do this in the movie Apollo 13 before I was an astronaut, and I said, I want to do that someday. And I took my helmet off just like he did in the movie, and I let go and then just watch it float there. And it was time to unstrap and get to work.